Welcome, everyone. I definitely just saw some of you a couple hours ago in my visit to Mid-Pacific, so greetings. Nice to see you again. And I think we may have seen a few of you this morning in our earlier session on writing your personal statement. So I hope we can still get some good wisdom out of this. But to introduce myself, my name is Grace Fisher. I am an Associate Dean of Admission here at Reed. I'm joined by Duncan King. Duncan, say hello.
Hi, everybody. My name is Duncan, also one of the admission counselors here at Reed.
Marvelous. And we are going to just try to briefly, succinctly, and helpfully give you some advice on writing your personal statement from the perspective of people who read them for a living. We read, I read about 1,000 applications last couple years. Each of our applications has 2 essays. So we read enough to know what we like and have some opinions, and hope that it's helpful for you all to learn from those. So what are we going to be talking about today? We have 5 keys to the personal statement. Fill in the blanks, be creative with the everyday, be focused, so what, and proofread. So we're going to go through these keys and talk about how you might think about your own essay as you develop it. So the first piece of advice that we have is to fill in the blanks and not just write us a resume. One thing that you might not know is that your activities list in the Common App is actually the page before the essay. So we've just read all of the cool things you do. You've described all of the different positions you have and what your impact is in the community. And sometimes people are tempted in their essay to use their essay as an opportunity to write their resume in paragraph form instead of bullet points. It's a missed opportunity. And your essay is this chance for you to tell us something that we're not learning anywhere else, to tell us something directly in your own voice, and to sort of exercise some control over your application. Whereas so much of your application is the culmination of your first 3.5 years of high school, your essay is this moment where it's kind of, except for an interview, it's about the closest you can get to sitting down across from us and telling us a story. So it's really exciting if we can learn something from that essay that we're not learning anywhere else in your application. So our next piece of advice is being creative with the everyday. Duncan.
Yeah, so being creative with the everyday is sort of a multifaceted tip. There are 3 pieces here. 1, we know that you're young, you haven't cured cancer yet. So that's to say that it's okay if you don't have a huge dramatic story to write about, or you don't want to write about a huge dramatic story. What we mean by the daily versus the dramatic is that, dramatic stories are wonderful, and often they can be, a good example of what you are like. They can tell us about you, but these big dramatic events sometimes can also tend towards similar narratives. If everybody writes about the big game, then it becomes really hard for us admission counselors to pick between the people who wrote about the big game. So we want to see something that is more unique to you, and often that comes out of the daily. We want to hear about objects that you use every day, things you do every day, people you talk to every day, things that are going to speak to more of who you are and how you're going to interact with our campus. So, let me think of a good example here. When we talk about the big game, we're talking about writing this dramatic, cinematic story. And how does that story link back to you? If you're going to tell us the big story of the big game, then you're going to want to say, here's what I learned from it, and here's what I bring back to my classes, back to my day-to-day life. and how it was incorporated into how I live my life, rather than just a one-time event. And we also talk about showcasing who you are now. Sometimes you might want to write an essay about a story in the past, about when you were 6 or maybe 12. When you write about those things, you got to make sure that you're linking it back to who you are in high school. Remember, we're not admitting a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old, we're admitting you. So if the story is wonderful, that's awesome, then we want to read it. But make sure to tell us why you're telling us the story and how it affects you now.
Wonderful, yes. Thank you, Duncan. Next, we want to talk a little bit about focus. Being narrow, thinking about depth over breadth, and being concise. So it can feel really hard to pick an essay topic because you might have a lot of different things that you want to tell us. And this goes back to that resume idea, right? You want to tell us all of the things you do with your time, all of the things that matter to you. And so it might seem counterintuitive, but actually some of the most effective essays are the ones that zoom in really closely on one thing about you instead of trying to capture everything. If you think about how your brain works, I find it a lot easier to remember one object than 7 objects, right? So I find it a lot easier to remember, oh, the blueberry stand essay rather than the blueberry stand avocado baseball essay, right? That's my poor brain, you know, if we're reading 20 applications in a day, it's just hard to retain all of that. So the most memorable essays, the most effective ones are ones where you narrow your focus down to one thing or one set of things, and then use that object or person or moment or story to reflect back on the larger picture. So with the example of the blueberry stand, the student didn't just talk about the blueberry stand that she worked at. She told us about, you know, kind of a day in the life of who she sees, what she thinks about, who she talks to, the languages that she speaks, how that relates to the books that she's reading. She really got us inside her head for this day, but it was all through this prism of the blueberry stand. And I got to really know how she thought, what mattered to her, what some of her experiences were through this narrow focus. The other thing to know about being concise is that the common application will literally cut you off at 650 words. So there's no way around it. So use that word counter in your Google Doc. When you paste it over, make sure all of the words made it. Don't worry about a title. You don't need those words. And try to see that not as a constriction, but as an opportunity to show us that you can tell us a good story in a short space of time, because that's a really great life skill. So next we're going to talk about, what does this all mean anyway?
Yeah, so what is something that we actually talk about a lot in our office when we are trying to share things about Read with you guys. The so what is the heart of the essay. It's the thesis of whatever story you are telling. You want to move beyond description alone and talk about why you're telling this story. Tell us why. Oftentimes it's great to address this even semi-directly, even though the prompt might not ask exactly why you're telling us this story. Again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. You want to link back with back to who you are now and how this has impacted you moving forward. Often a relatively common error in personal statements is to write a purely descriptive essay. A purely descriptive essay is wonderful and it could show us that you're a great writer, but we need to see a little bit more than that. We need to see how you're going to be a community member on our campus. We want to see how you are, again, in the day-to-day. And so telling us why and addressing sort of that thesis statement can be a really wonderful way to make sure that your essay hits home.
Super. And we actually have an example excerpt from an essay that a student submitted to read and was admitted and gave us permission, that I think exemplifies a couple of these different tips. But first, we're going to talk about proofreading. So I don't think I need to elaborate too much. You guys know proofreading is important. Spelling, thesaurus, structure and organization. And the reason these things are important is not because we are, obsessive and mean and looking to ding students because they made a mistake here or there. Y'all receive our emails. You know that we make mistakes too. We're humans, we recognize that. But what a mistake does, if you think about when you're like reading an article online and you see a typo, suddenly you're thinking about that typo and you're not thinking about what that person is trying to say to you. And it's the same when we're reading an application. If I am reading through your class list and I see that you spelled calculus, calcululus, I'm not thinking about like, oh, that's cool that you took calc, right? I'm thinking like, calcululus, right? So you're doing yourself a favor if you're allowing us to focus. And spell check is not, it's just not, we've all had experiences where spell check did not catch our mistakes, so it's not good enough. You need a human. I recommend a human other than you too, because after the third time you're reading your essay, your eyes are just going to glaze over. But back to our example, I do truly adore lobster fishing. My love for it extends past the obvious, past the fact that I make money, past the fact that I get to work outside in the beautiful summer weather. It extends far beyond the free lobsters, even past the blossoming friendships I have with my colorful coworkers. I owe it a vast debt of gratitude. Lobster fishing opened my eyes to hard work and determination, and in doing so, allowed me to flourish substantially in high school. So the reason we chose this excerpt to show from you, and this is the first intro paragraph of a student's essay, is that first of all, it's clearly going to be focused on one thing, and that thing might be a resume item. In fact, I really hope that this student had a lobster fishing job as one of their activities. But instead of going down the list, they're saying, let's do a deep dive on this one thing that I did. It also is talking not about like the most epic lobster fishing moment of their life necessarily, although they might touch on particular high points. But they're talking about this thing that they did in the day-to-day, because our everydays are the days that make us who we are too. We're not just us on our worst day or our best day. Most of our days are just days. So the student's going to tell us about that. And like Duncan said, this essay is actually pretty explicitly stating the so what. This job that I had taught me new values. It taught me the hard work and determination, and that changed how the student approached high school. And that actually showed up in the student's application. We saw that they had a really significant grade increase in their junior year. And so this essay never said, and that's why I got better grades, right? But when we're looking at these two things together, we're thinking, oh, that makes sense. Something changed between sophomore and junior year. Here's a part of that change that this student experienced. And it shows their ability to self-reflect, to understand and analyze their own behavior and how they've grown. College is a time of a lot of growth. And so we're really interested in learning about your growth and how you see yourself and your trajectory. So we said this would be short and sweet. I want to leave you with some process advice. Your college, I think the best way to write a college essay is to actually write 3 college essays. That doesn't mean 3 perfectly polished, blah, 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 you spend hours and hours on them, but try out a couple topics. You might think you have this amazing idea and you start writing it and it's just not happening. Don't force it. Try something else. Try some brainstorms, try some free writes. Some people work really well by looking at the prompts, and the prompts that make you think, oh, I know how to answer that prompt. A lot of admission counselors aren't too worried about the prompts. And it can be better to just think about, what do I actually want to talk about in my essay? And then, okay, what prompt fits that? And if you're not sure, topic of your choice is a prompt that you can choose, and it is perfectly fine. Finally, so write, try out writing a couple of different essays, and then seek out people whose advice you trust, both for the kind of grammar stuff, but also just to make sure that your essay sounds like you, to make sure that it tells a story that that shows off you in your best light. I had one of my best friends read my essay, and they gave me the most useful advice about, like, yes, this shows off what I think is so cool about you. That sentence makes you sound a little weird. You are weird, but you're not that kind of weird. So nix that one, right? Your friends will be able to give you that kind of character advice that an English teacher may or may not be able to. So we've hit our 15 minutes. We want to make sure you can go off and have dinner or whatever else you're planning on doing this evening. So I know we didn't have a lot of time for questions, but there are great ways to get your questions answered by emailing admission@reed.edu. We'll put that up on the screen in a moment. We also are answering all kinds of other questions in our upcoming sessions this week. Tomorrow, there's a case study of a college application. You get to spend more time with me, if that sounds good. Looking at some actual college applications and sort of learning how we view the different elements, all the different things admission counselors are thinking. We have a session tomorrow also on acing the interview, what the interview is, why we do them, how you can make the most of that. Finally, we're going to be sending out a quick survey after this by email. If you can fill that out, that would be super helpful. We really enjoy developing programming that's not just about how great Reed is, as great as we think it is, but is also telling you, is helping you with this process, which is all the more kind of daunting and challenging this year. So if this is helpful, or if you think we could do something better or different, we'd really love to hear from you. And we'd love to hear from you with any questions you have about writing an awesome essay, college visits, Reed, anything you want to know. Email admission@reed.edu. You'll get put in touch with your admission counselor, and we really look forward to talking to you all. It's a lot more fun than staring at the four walls of our offices and bedrooms. So that's all I've got. Duncan, any final words?
I don't think so. I think we've touched on pretty much everything. I'm excited to get to know everybody through their essays. That's Absolutely. Really the crux of the whole application process. So
yes, very much looking forward to it. Thanks for coming. Have a good evening. Be well, stay hydrated. And we will see you all some other time, I hope.